Venerable Gherontie, the Fool for Christ, was born on November 4th, 1934, in the village of Viskri, not far from the town of Rupe, now in Brașov County. At his baptism, he received Saint George the Great Martyr as his patron, to whom he remained deeply devoted throughout his life. He was the second of 3 children of Ioan and Elena Aldea, who made a living by farming the land. From childhood, he led a deeply religious life marked by introspection, fasting and prayer, with his mother serving as his first and lifelong model of faith. Quite early, his religious devotion began to be seen as excessive and increasingly misunderstood, even within his own family. In primary school, he was often caught praying, for which he would be scolded or even punished by his teacher. His different way of behaving and his lack of reaction to the cruelty of those around him became, over the years, a reason for his schoolmates and other children in his native village to mock or humiliate him in various ways. Testimonies from those who knew him during his teenage years speak of his intense spiritual struggles, long hours of prayer, strict fasts, and even several-day fasts, sometimes during periods when he would accompany his family to work in the fields. His religious life was already close to that of hermits, even though he lived in the world. During this time, people around him began to notice, in various situations, the power of his prayers. In those years, he increasingly visited monk Modest Aldea, his father's brother, who was the abbot of Ciolanu Monastery, and later the ecclesiarch of the cathedral in Buzău. For a significant period, he became his disciple in the hermitage, learning many of the mysteries of monastic life from him. Deeply devoted to monastic life, Venerable Gherontie refused in the autumn of 1959 to leave Ciolanu Monastery, as the communist authorities in Romania demanded of young monks. This marked the beginning of his great sufferings for the faith. He was imprisoned for a time at Jilava Penitentiary, where he continued his ascetic struggles despite intense pressure to abandon monastic life. After several days in a cell under near-extermination conditions, weakened to the limit of his strength, the Mother of God appeared to him, telling him to embrace the foolishness for Christ and promising to help him carry this cross. Shortly afterward, the authorities considered that the sufferings he had endured had irreparably affected his mental balance and decided to commit him to a psychiatric hospital, from which he was later released. From this period onward, Venerable Gherontie concealed his entire personal ascetic struggle and spiritual work in the world under the guise of foolishness for Christ. He alternated visits to monasteries with stays at home, and later with families who hosted him for various periods. Wherever he went, he encouraged a high religious life, prayer, and asceticism, supporting them primarily through his personal example and through brief, often highly personalized words of teaching. He would pray for hours on his knees, keep vigil through many nights, and observe very strict fasts, including entire days of complete fasting. He spoke of heaven and eternal blessings, recounting some of the moments in which he had seen the Mother of God, or when the adversary, the devil, tried to frighten him and hinder his spiritual ascent. Because he was socially ostracized, he was constantly under the scrutiny of the authorities, who committed him to psychiatric hospitals several more times. He only agreed to speak about the persecutions he endured to glorify God, who had kept him alive and mentally intact despite the treatments he received. Another crucial moment in his life occurred when he boldly warned the communist leader of Romania before 1989 that if he did not believe in God, those around him would shoot him. This led to a new period of suffering for Venerable Gherontie, from which he was delivered by the Mother of God. After 1990, he continued his spiritual struggles and his paths of witnessing the faith, strengthening believers and healing through his prolonged ascetic efforts many people who were suffering greatly, often with serious illnesses. He was also very compassionate toward the poor he met, giving them even the very clothes he was wearing if he had no money to give. He believed that his monastic garments and belts, which he gave away generously, carried divine grace, and many who received them were healed of various ailments through these sacred gifts. In order to continue his spiritual work and to avoid being praised by those who witnessed miracles performed through him or received God's immediate help in life's great trials through his prayers, he humbled himself in the unique manner of a fool for Christ. This included public self-reproach, giving the impression of speaking nonsense, wearing worn-out clothes, apparent dependence on alcohol, and exhibiting unusual behavior during church services. Throughout his spiritual journey, he sought out the great Romanian spiritual elders, whom he respected and with whom he remained in communion of faith and prayer for his entire life. The presence and work of the Holy Spirit in his life, however, could be felt constantly. The most common image people had of Venerable Gherontie was that of a great ascetic capable of performing countless prostrations until the end of his life and remaining on his knees in prayer for hours, including in church, almost always with his hands raised toward God or the holy icons. The ways in which he transmitted the divine power he received through his ascetic struggles included his paintings, which primarily depicted the heavenly Jerusalem, as well as the holy songs he recorded over the years. All of this reveal him as a person living in unwaning light, a mediator and support on the path of salvation for thousands of his fellow human beings. Alongside his personal ascetic struggles, he constantly sought love and communion of faith with others, urging everyone to cultivate harmony within the family, to live in peace with those around them, to be a model of faithful living, and to cherish the ancestral church, its priests and hierarchs. He often spoke of love for one's country, and on more than one occasion encouraged those who had left to return to their families. He remained in the memory of those who knew him as a lover of the purity of childhood, a supporter of a clean and virtuous life, and a fighter against sin, which he sometimes boldly exposed for correction, always in a way that brought spiritual benefit to the person addressed. Because he made his life a path of obedience to God's commandments and a self-sacrificial offering for the name and saving work of the Son of God in the world, he received great gifts from God, including the gift of performing miracles, of foreseeing events, and of revealing for healing the shadows in people's souls. God fulfilled his prayer and desire to pass from this world to eternity from the Holy Land. His soul departed to heaven like a new birth from the very city of the birth of Christ, whom he loved and glorified with a love that many mistook for worldly madness. On the night of October 12, 2018, he awaited the Lord on his knees in prayer and passed into eternity, seeing God's glory, which remained upon his face and in his open eyes, even at the tomb. God willed that he be brought from Bethlehem to Romania to be buried at Tismana monastery, which he had sought most often in the final period of his life. All who witnessed him recognized his sanctity. After 8 days, the natural signs of death had not affected his body, which remained soft and fragrant with myrrh, and those who saw or heard unclean spirits crying out in the presence of his coffin testified to his spiritual power. The sequence of miracles performed by Venerable Gherontie during his life has continued even after his passing. The sick who receive healing through touching objects he once carried, through his photograph, through the cross on his grave, or through prayer offered in faith, bear witness to his continuing intercession. In any need, Venerable Gherontie responds swiftly.